Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day, Pennsylvania, German, Grunzebdick, Grunzedag, Grunzodog, Mermeltutig, Nova Scotia. Dax Day is a popular North American tradition observed in the United States and Canada on February 2. It derives from the Pennsylvania Dutch superstition that if a groundhog emerges from its burrow on this day and sees its shadow due to clear weather, it will retreat to its den, and winter will go on for 6 more weeks. If it does not see its shadow because of cloudiness, spring will arrive early. Popular North American tradition. This article is about the North American tradition. For the film, see Groundhog Day film. For other uses, see Groundhog Day disambiguation. While the tradition remains popular in the 21st century, studies have found no consistent association between a groundhog seeing its shadow and the subsequent arrival time of spring-like weather. Weather lore was brought from German-speaking areas where the badger, German Dax, is the forecasting animal. This appears to be an enhanced version of the lore that clear weather on the Christian festival of Candlemas forebodes a prolonged winter. Groundhog Day ceremony held at Punxsutawney in western Pennsylvania, centering on a semi-mythical groundhog named Punxsutawney Phil, has become the most frequently attended ceremony. Grunzo lodges in Pennsylvania Dutch country in the southeastern part of the state observe the occasion as well. Other cities in the United States and Canada also have adopted the event. Pennsylvania Dutch were immigrants from German-speaking areas of Europe. The Germans had a tradition of marking Candlemas February 2 as Badger Day Dagstad, on which if a badger emerging from its den encountered a sunny day, thereby casting a shadow, it presaged 4 more weeks of winter. Candlemas is a primarily Catholic festival but also known in the German Protestant Lutheran churches. In folk religion, various traditions and superstitions continue to be linked with the holiday, although this was discouraged by the Protestant reformers in the 16th century. Notably, several traditions akin to weather lores use the weather at Candlemas to predict the start of spring. Weather predicting animal on Candlemas usually was the badger, although regionally the animal was the bear or the fox. The original weather-predicting animal in Germany had been the bear, another hibernating mammal, but when they grew scarce, the lore became altered. Similarity to the groundhog lore has been noted for the German formula, Sind sich der Dachs in der Lichtmoch, so jet or off wir Wochen wieder Zulach. If the badger sunbathes during Candlemas week, for 4 more weeks he will be back in his hole. A slight variant is found in a collection of weather lore. Bauerregeln, lit. Farmers' rules, printed in Austria. In Earth, Pennsylvanians maintained the same tradition as the Germans on Groundhog Day, except that winter's spell would be prolonged for 6 weeks instead of 4. For the Pennsylvania Dutch, the badger became the Dachs, which in Dutch referred to groundhog. Standard term for groundhog was Grundex from German Dax, with the regional variant in York County being Grunza, a direct translation of the English name, according to a 19th book on the dialect. The form was a regional variant according to one 19th source. However, the weather superstition that begins der Zweithörning is Grunzedick. 1d Grunza Urshit Cent. February 2nd is Groundhog Day. If the groundhog sees its shadow, is given as common to all 14 counties in Dutch Pennsylvania country. In a 1915 monograph in the Thomas R. Brendel collection of Pennsylvania German folklore, Brendel preserved the following lore from the local Pennsylvania German dialect: Wander Dax Sechet Set Imlich Miss Mary, Dan Jetter Witter Inslach Unbelly Knock Sex Woch Dren, Wanlit Miss Mary Our Dreeb is Dan Bleep der Dax House Unswatnach in Anner Friefjahr. When the groundhog sees his shadow on the morning of February 2, he will again go into his hole and remain there for 6 weeks. But if the morning of February 2 is overcast, the groundhog will remain outside and there will be another spring. The form Grunzo has been used by the lodge in Allentown and elsewhere. Brendel also recorded the name Grunzedig Groundhog Day in Lebanon County and Dagstad Groundhog Day in Northampton County. Victor Hugo, in Les Miserables, 1864, discusses the day as full as it was the 2nd of February, that ancient Candlemas day whose treacherous sun, the precursor of 6 weeks of cold, inspired Matthew Lainsburg with the 2 lines which have deservedly become classic: Uxaluster Kneelers Rentry and Saw Cavern, let it gleam or let it glimmerth, bear goes back into his cave. Hugo, Victor, Les Miserables, Trans, Von Stock, and McAfee, based on Lilbar, Signet Classics, N.Y. 1987. P. Earth groundhog was once also known by the obsolete Latin alias Artemis monax. The genus name signified bear rat. The European marmot is of the same genus and was formerly called Artemis alpinus. It was speculated that the European counterpart might have lore similar to the groundhog attached to it. See also whether Loref German version, with the introduction of the badger or other beasts, was an expansion on a more simple tradition that if the weather was sunny and clear on Candlemas Day people expected winter to continue. The simpler version is summarized in the English-Scots dialect coupled that runs: if Candlemas is fair and clear there will be 2 winters in the year, with equivalent phrases in French and German, and the existence of a corresponding Latin couplet has been suggested as evidence of the great antiquity of this tradition. Use of candles on the Christian Candlemas was inspired by the Roman rite for the goddess Februa, in which a procession of candles was done on February 2, according to Yoder. The Roman calendar, in turn, had Celtic origins. Candlemas concurs with Imbolc, one of the Celtic cross-quarter days, the 4 days which marked the midpoints between solstice and equinox. Scholar Reese Carpenter in 1946 emphasized that the Badger Day tradition was strong in Germany but absent in the British Isles, and he referred to this as a reason that the U.S. Groundhog Day was not brought by immigrants from these places. Or did exist a belief among Roman Catholics in Britain that the hedgehog predicted the length of winter, or so it has been claimed, but without demonstration of its age. In a publication by the Scotland-born American journalist Thomas C. Macmillan in 1886, and American writer-journalist Samuel Adams Drake's book published in Urin the Gaelic Calendar of Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man, Brigid's Day February 1 is a day for predicting the weather, while in Scotland the animal that heralds spring on this day is a snake, and on the Isle of Man a large bird. In Ireland, folklorist Kevin Danaher records lore of hedgehogs being observed for this. In an Irish folk tradition, Street Bride's Day, 1 February, is the first day of spring, and thus of the farmer's year. To see a hedgehog was a good weather sign, for the hedgehog come out of the hole in which he has spent the winter, looks about to judge the weather, and returns to his burrow if bad weather is going to continue. If he stays out, it means that he knows the mild weather is coming. Groundhog Marmota monax is a hibernating rodent of the family Shiridae, belonging to the group of large ground squirrels. Observance of Groundhog Day in the United States first occurred in German communities in Pennsylvania, according to known records. The earliest mention of Groundhog Day is an entry on February 2, 1840, in the diary of James L. Morris of Morgantown, in Pennsylvania, Dutch country, according to the book on the subject by Don Yoder. This was a Welsh enclave, but the dearest was commenting on his neighbors who were of German stock. Of first reported news of a Groundhog Day observance was arguably made by the Punxsutawney Spirit newspaper of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, in 1886, up to the time of going to press. The beast has not seen its shadow. However, it was not until the following year, in 1887, that the first Groundhog Day considered official was commemorated there, with a group making a trip to the Gobbler's Knob part of town to consult the groundhog. People have gathered annually at the spot for the event ever since. Clymer Fries, who was city editor at the Punxsutawney Spirit, is credited as the father who conceived the idea of Groundhog Day. It has also been suggested that Punxsutawney was where all the Groundhog Day events originated, from where it spread to other parts of the United States and Canada. Groundhog Day celebrations of the Urs were carried out by the Punxsutawney Elks Lodge. The lodge members were the genesis of the Groundhog Club, formed later, which continued the Groundhog Day tradition. But the lodge started out being interested in the groundhog as a game animal for food. It had started to serve groundhog at the lodge and had been organizing a hunting party on a day each year in late summer. Chronologies given are somewhat inconsistent in the literature. The first groundhog picnic was held in 1887, according to one source, but given as post circa 1889 by a local historian in a journal. The historian states that around 1889 the meat was served in the lodge's banquet, and the organized hunt started after that. Either way, the Punxsutawney Groundhog Club was formed in 1899 and continued the hunt and groundhog feast, which took place annually in September. The hunt portion of it became increasingly a ritualized formality, because the practical procurement of meat had to occur well ahead of time for marinating. A drink called the groundhog punch was also served. The flavor has been described as a cross between pork and chicken. The hunt and feast did not attract enough outside interest, and the practice discontinued if Groundhog was not named Phil until 1961, possibly as an indirect reference to Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. The largest Groundhog Day celebration is held in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, where crowds as large as 40,000 gather each year, nearly 8 times the year-round population of the town. The average draw had been about 2,000 until the 1993 film Groundhog Day, which is set at the festivities in Punxsutawney, after which attendance rose to about 10,000. The official Phil is pretended to be a supercentenarian, having been the same forecasting beast since, or in 2019, the 133rd year of the tradition. The groundhog was summoned to come out at 7:25 a.m. on February 2, but did not see its shadow. Fans of Punxsutawney Phil awaited his arrival starting at 6 a.m., thanks to a live stream provided by Visit Pennsylvania. The live stream has been a tradition for the past several years, allowing more people than ever to watch. The animal meteorologist was the 135th, and for the first time, much of the inner circle members were required to wear a mask. The groundhog was summoned at 7:25 a.m. on February 2 and saw its shadow. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the ceremony was held behind closed doors, with no fans allowed to act, and saw the 136th time of the event, and the groundhog saw its shadow, predicting 6 more weeks of winter. Mid-Atlantic Slumbering Groundhog Lodge, which was formed in 1907, has carried out the ceremonies that take place in Corryville, Pennsylvania. It used to be a contending rival to Punxsutawney over the Groundhog Day fame. It employs a taxidermic specimen stuffed woodchuck in southeastern Pennsylvania. Groundhog lodges, Grunso lodges, celebrate the holiday with fursuling social events in which food is served, speeches are made, and one or more spiel plays or skits are performed for entertainment. The Pennsylvania German dialect is the only language spoken at the event, and those who speak English pay a penalty, usually in the form of a nickel, dime, or quarter per word spoken, with the money put into a bowl in the center of the table. In Milltown, New Jersey. Milltown Mel was purchased in 2008 in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, by Jerry and Kathy Guffling, and lived in a cage in the Gufflings' backyard. Mel's first event was at the family business, the Bronson and Guffling Funeral Home, with later events moved to the American Legion Post, with free coffee and donuts served afterwards. Mel died in 2021. Stonewall Jackson predicts at Space Farms Zoo and Museumsics at the Groundhog, and Otis the Hedgehog predict at Turtleback Zoo. Great Neck Greta of Great Neck, Long Island, New York, predicted in Quigley of the Hamptons. Resident of the Save the Animals Rescue Foundation predicts at Quogue Village Fire Department. Staten Island Chuck is the stage name for the official weather forecasting woodchuck for New York City. Housed in the Staten Island Zoo in 2009, Chuck bit then NYC Mayor Mike Bloomberg, prompting zoo officials to quietly replace him with his daughter Charlotte. In 2014, NYC Mayor Bill de Blasio famously dropped Charlotte during the ceremony, visibly disturbing many of the children present for the event. Charlotte's untimely death a week later prompted rumors she was killed by the fall, although the zoo later said this was unlikely to be the cause of Charlotte's demise. As a result, Bill de Blasio has not participated in the tradition since Dunkirk. Dave, a stage name for numerous groundhogs that have filled the role since 1916, is the local groundhog for Western New York, handled by Bob Will, a typewriter repairman who runs a rescue shelter for groundhogs. Will is adamant that Dunkirk Dave does not actually predict the date of spring because that is fixed by calendars, but instead predicts the harshness of the remainder of winter. French Creek Freddy is West Virginia's resident groundhog meteorologist, a resident of the West Virginia State Wildlife Center in French Creek, West Virginia. Freddy made his debut in 1978 and boasts an accuracy rate of approximately 8%. On Groundhog Day, 2022, Freddy predicted 6 more weeks of winter, with the mayor of Buckhannon and members of the community in Attendance, Midwest. In the Midwest, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, is the self-proclaimed groundhog capital of the world. This title taken in response to the Punxsutawney Spirit's 1952 newspaper article describing Sun Prairie as a remote two-cow village buried somewhere in the wilderness. In 2015, Jimmy the Groundhog bit the ear of Mayor John Freund, and the story quickly went viral worldwide. The next day, a mayoral proclamation absolved Jimmy XI of any wrongdoing. Bucky Chuck, Ohio's official state groundhog, is one of 2 weather-predicting groundhogs. He resides in Marion, Woodstock Willie, in Woodstock, Illinois, the shooting location for the 1993 film Groundhog Day. South in Washington, D.C., the DuPont Circle Groundhog Day event features Potomac Phil, another taxidermic specimen, from his first appearance in 2012 to 2018. Phil's spring predictions invariably agreed with those of the more lively Punxsutawney Phil, who made his predictions half an hour earlier. In addition, Phil always predicted correctly 6 more months of political gridlock. However, after being accused of collusion in 2018, Potomac Phil contradicted Punxsutawney Phil in 2019 and, further, predicted 2 more years of political insanity. Birmingham Bill, at Birmingham Zoo, was taking a break from predicting in Raleigh, NC. An annual event at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences includes Sir Walter Raleigh. According to museum officials, Raleigh has been correct a percentage of the time versus Punxsutawney Phil's a percentage'll suffer in the American South. The General Beauregard Lee makes predictions from Lilburn, Georgia, later Butts County, Georgia. The University of Dallas in Irving, Texas has boasted of hosting the second largest groundhog celebration in the world. The day is observed with various ceremonies at other locations in North America beyond the United States due to Nova Scotia's Atlantic time zone. Shubenacadie Sam makes the first Groundhog Day prediction in North America. Dax Day, from the German Dax, is Groundhog Day in the dialect of Lunenburg, Nova Scotia in French Canada, where the day is known as Jour de la Marmite. Fred La Marmite of Val-d'Espoir has been the representative forecaster for the province of Quebec since 2009. A study also shows that in Quebec, the marmot or groundhog Cephalou are regarded as Candlemas weather predicting beasts in some scattered spots, but the bear is the more usual animal. Weirton Billy forecasts annually from Weirton, Ontario. Balzac Billy is the prairie prognosticator, a man-sized groundhog mascot who prognosticates weather on Groundhog Day from Balzac. Albert Nanaimo of Ferryport City on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. Present Chopper, Marlou, and Van Isle Violet, all wild Vancouver Island marmots, for forecasts via the Marmot Recovery Foundation. Accuracy. In Pennsylvania, Punxsutawney Phil has become a popular tradition. On February 2, people within the city will gather to find out whether or not Phil's shadow is revealed. With that, he will allegedly determine whether spring will soon begin by not seeing his shadow, or if winter will ensue for 6 more weeks. Punxsutawney Phil's statistics are kept by the Pennsylvania's Groundhog Club, which cares for the animal. Phil has predicted 103 forecasts for winter and just 17 for an early spring. Most assessments of Phil's accuracy have given accuracy lower than would be expected with random chance, with Storm Facts Almanac giving an estimate of I%, and meteorologist Tim Roche of Weather Underground giving a I% accuracy rate between 1969 and 2016, a range chosen because local weather data was most reliable from 1969 onward, and a I% record in that time span when predicting early spring. The National Centers for Environmental Information, using a basic metric of above normal temperatures for early spring and below normal temperatures for more winter, placed Punxsutawney Phil's accuracy at I% for the 10-year period preceding 2019. Other poor results from analysis are reported by the Farmer's Almanac, which itself has been known for forecasts of questionable accuracy as exactly 50% accuracy, and the National Geographic Society reporting only I% success. But a Middlebury College team found that a long-term analysis of temperature high-low predictions were I% accurate, although when the groundhog predicted early spring it was usually wrong. Canadian meteorologist Cindy Day has estimated that Nova Scotia's Shubenacadie Sam has an accuracy rate of about I% compared to I% for Weirton Willie in Ontario. Part of the problem with pinning down an accuracy rate for the groundhog is that what constitutes an early spring is not clearly defined. Assessments of the accuracy of other groundhogs, such as Staten Island Chuck, do use an objective formula. In Chuck's case, a majority of days that reach 40 F4C in New York City between Groundhog Day and the March equinox prediction based on an animal's behavior used to be given more credence in the past when stores of food became scarce as winter progressed. Own theory states that the groundhog naturally comes out of hibernation in central Pennsylvania in early February because of the increasing average temperature. Under this theory, if German settlement had been centered further north, Groundhog Day would take place at a later date. However, The observed behavior of groundhogs in central New Jersey was that they mostly come out of their burrows in mid-March, regardless of Groundhog Day, whether there are several different ways of defining when spring begins. But by some common methods of doing so, the first day of spring is around March 20, which is always just under 7 weeks after February 2, even in leap years. Also, the idea of spring arriving early is a highly subjective notion which could arguably refer to almost anything from several days to several weeks. At any rate, Groundhog Day serves as a convenient and whimsical milestone to mark the end of the darkest 3 months of the year, November, December, and January in the Northern Hemisphere, and bookends nicely with Halloween, the two holidays being opposite and roughly equidistant in time from the winter solstice, with Halloween festivities starting after sunset and taking place in the nighttime, and Groundhog Day being a celebration of sunrise and morning. Similar customs. See also weather lore, animal signs, and weather lore. February in Croatia and Serbia, Orthodox Christians have a tradition that on February 2 Candlemas or February 15 Sretenge, the meeting of the Lord, the bear will awaken from winter dormancy, and if it meets its own shadow in this sleepy and confused state, it will get scared and go back to sleep for an additional 40 days, thus prolonging the winter. Thus, if it is sunny on Sretenge, it is a sign that the winter is not over yet. If it is cloudy, it is a good sign that the winter is about to end. Similarly, in Germany, on the June 27, they recognize the Seven Sleepers' Day, Siebenschläfertag. If it rains that day, the rest of summer is supposedly going to be rainy as well. In the United Kingdom, July 15 is known as Streets Within's Day. It was traditionally believed that if it rained on that day, it would rain for the next 40 days and nights. Popular culture. The holiday gained more prominence with the release of the 1993 comedy film Groundhog Day with Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell. The film became the 13th highest grossing of the year, with over $70 million at the box office. Over time, the film became a cult classic and significantly increased awareness and attendance at Groundhog Day events. Of holidays, origins also plays a prominent role in the 1979 Rankin-Bass holiday special Jack Frost, where groundhog prognosticator Pardon Me Pete's shadow is actually manipulated by Jack Frost, initially so Jack could buy more time to use his wintry magic to protect January Junction from the villain, but over the years since has become a proper agreement between the two to give Jack more time for wintry fun in exchange for Pete getting extra hibernation time.